What's going on, martial arts fanatics? Welcome back. As always, I'm Coach Greg. Today I'm going to do a Q&A from my office, and it's going to be kind of like a wired autocomplete kind of thing. So I just pulled up a random list of the 11 most common martial arts questions. I have not looked through these. I have no idea what they are. I'm going to give you my take on each of them, okay? Before I get started, don't forget to check out the Enemy and Fight System. It's available on Amazon and Dynamic Striking. Let's get to it. All right, here we go. 11 common questions about martial arts. All right. Number one, which martial art is the best for street fights? Everybody likes to say it's not the style, it's the artist and all that bullshit, but there are some styles that are better than others. I like to say that the way that you know that your martial art is effective for self-defense is, one, you do a lot of liveness and duress. You do a lot of liveness training. If all you do is drills and walkthroughs and stuff like that, no, it's never going to be sufficient compared to other martial arts. So the arts that have lots of sparring tend to be the most successful. The second thing is that sparring needs to be based on high percentile threats. So if you spend, like Taekwondo does a lot of sparring, but they spend all their time dealing with somebody who is throwing a lot of roundhouse kicks, for example. They don't spend a lot of time dealing with the jab cross. So it needs to have a lot of that. As far as weapon stuff, it's good to train a little bit of weapon stuff in there as part of it, but ultimately what is going to make you the most successful is a lot of liveness, and a lot of liveness focused on the things that you're most likely to deal with, meaning a jab, a cross, a takedown, things like that. If somebody grabbing a hold of you, like if your style gives you solutions for that and you do a lot of stuff under duress, you'll be fine. So which martial arts work the best for that? I think MMA is awesome for it. That's why I teach MMA for self-defense, where we add in weapon defense and gi and stuff like that into MMA classes that are geared more towards like general self-defense situations. So we do all the things you normally do in MMA, but we add this. Sambo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, these styles do really well. Styles that seem to have some trouble. Some versions of karate are great, some are not. It depends on the karate, it depends on the school, it depends on the instructor. Taekwondo is frequently problematic. Hapkidos, a lot of the Korean arts really struggle in this. Some are better than others. A lot of them tend to struggle. I do like Gangkwon Yusul. If you ever watch that guy's video, their videos, they have really cool stuff. Not a big fan of Krav Maga. I think a lot of it is more aggression than technique, and that can sometimes be problematic, although teaching aggression is a good skill. Fitness and aggression will get you really far in a fight. So I guess my answer is any art that focuses on those things. What is the best martial art for self-defense? It's the same thing. I don't know why they had that as two separate questions. Like, what was it? Best martial arts for street fight, self-defense? So I guess the thing I would put in here to separate that is that a street fight and a self-defense situation may not be the same. And I kind of distinguish them as, one is to some extent voluntary and agreed combat. The other one is not. In self-defense, often you're talking about a situation where you are jumped and you are responding very quickly to whatever gets presented with. Once again, this is about doing situationals. If your art deals with this stuff, it should have you pretty prepared. We have a very solid self-defense curriculum as part of our training. So we have a lot of things where we talk about somebody putting you up against a wall in a choke, headlock, all this stuff. Like, we have very clear high percentile solutions. So it could be any art that meets the qualifications for question one, which is street fight, and just has a self-defense curriculum for this. So that's something that we try to put a lot of emphasis on. My students really like it, is just have a lot of training under duress, deal with most common threats, but then also have a self-defense curriculum that you can respond with simple techniques under duress. Okay. How can I learn martial arts online? It depends on to what extent you want to learn and what your experience is beforehand. You can definitely learn some things online, no question. BJJ Fanatics, Dynamic Striking, really great to improve your game. If you are a total beginner, there are definitely a lot of videos that can, like on YouTube, that will give you some good beginner stuff that you could start. learning how to throw a jab cross, learning how to throw kicks, learning the basics. But it's only going to get you so far, because ultimately, one of the things that's in-person training does that online training does not do is having lots of partners to spar with. Like, that is a thing. But if you have some buddies and that's really helpful. But also, you need somebody to kind of like catch where you're messing up. And martial arts, you're gonna have a lot of questions if you're doing it right. Like, it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. And sometimes you might not even know the questions you need to ask, if that makes sense. Like, you might not realize this is a thing that you need to find out more about. You just know you're having a hard time, but you're not sure how to put words to it. And that's what a good coach does for you. So there's definitely some things you can learn. If you are an experienced or intermediate or advanced student, jiu-jitsu, part of the reason jiu-jitsu is elevated as a sport is Gordon Ryan tutorials. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of guys have elevated their game watching things that Gordon Ryan, John Danaher put out. You know what I mean? I look at tutorials all the time. I like BJJ fanatics. I like dynamic striking. That's why I put stuff out there. Of course, going to my channel is a great way to learn stuff. But, I mean, studying fight footage, that's another thing you can do online, just watching fights. So, yeah, I think you can learn a lot. I don't think you can do it as a full-time program. I think you could start with it. If you don't have anything near you, not a lot of people live in places where there's nothing around. There's always something. And you can always start a club, and you guys can learn together. All right, number 4, what's the best martial art for women? Same martial arts for guys. I mean, really, if it's a good, effective martial art, it's going to work regardless. This is more of a question of how can a woman be successful in a fight? And it's also more of a question like, how do you win in a fight against somebody who is maybe bigger, stronger, has better natural attributes? The answer to that is not about which martial art. The answer to that is understanding that the more natural attribute advantages your opponent has, the more technique you need to overcome it. It's the same thing for me. I'm 43 years old. I'm 215. If I come across a 25-year-old linebacker for the Browns, I have to have a lot of technique to beat that guy because his natural attributes are that much better. Weapons are also like same thing. Like, you need a lot of technique to overcome that difference, that disparity in the situation. For women, oftentimes they're not always just smaller, but maybe they've also spent less time fighting. Like, a lot of women just don't fight as much because they don't grow up doing that stuff. A lot of girls don't grow up rough and tumble. I'm not going to say all, but a lot of women are not taught to be rough and tumble. It's not encouraged out of them. So that's where they have a bit of a disparity in technique starting off the bat. But they can come in and learn a lot and be able to overcome a lot if you learn the right things. If you learn a few things, you can get really far and be able to be more successful against somebody who might be larger. But it takes time and technique. Like, that's really the answer. Like, people are like, Wing Chun sucks for fighting. I'm going to be straight out. Like, it's fun to see in movies. It sucks for fighting. It's absolutely, like, it's not going to help you if you're a woman. Jiu-jitsu can be really good, but because it checks those other boxes, right? Boxing, same thing, checks the other boxes. MMA. Which actor or famous fighter would win against another in a fight? I think they're saying, like, which famous martial artist would, like, what actor would beat other actors? Oh, I see. Like, who would Bruce Lee beat so-and-so in a fight? So the answer is, in a competitive fight, Bruce Lee doesn't beat a whole lot of people. I don't want to talk about, like, how overrated he is. Bruce Lee is important because of what he did to elevate martial arts and his influence in martial arts. But he is not even close to the best martial artist of all time. Chuck Norris is probably one of the best actors as martial artists. Not only was he a world-class karate guy, but he also is like a third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. Long before other people got into jiu-jitsu, before the UFC, he was doing jiu-jitsu. He's a guy who would have been a real nightmare in a fight. Gene LaBelle, another guy who would have been really nasty. Steven Seagal can barely beat a flight of stairs at this point. Tony Jaa's a good movie actor. He's great at choreography, but I don't think he would do very well in real fights unless he trained for them. Michael J. White, I think he's probably pretty good. I don't think he's as good as he thinks he is. but I do think he's probably pretty good in a fight. His stand-up's probably pretty good. I have no idea what his ground game is like. I think he's done some. What's his name? The guy from the Transporter. I think he's done a bunch of stuff. But, you know, I think most martial artists in movies, you know, they train for choreography. It's a very different skill set. Training for movie choreography is not the same skill set as competitive fighting. Just like what I do in coaching and larger scale martial arts stuff is not the same thing as being a competitive fighter. You know, I know a lot about martial arts. Could I beat a pro UFC fighter? No, probably not. Most of those guys are animals. They're so good. I was just talking about this with Coach Alonso before, that the guys on the bottom echelon in the UFC were the guys who locally were destroying everybody. Why does it cost money to train in martial arts? Because we are providing a service like anything else. This is kind of a dumb question. Really, that's one of the most asked questions? All right. You know, so part of it is overhead of the school. If you look at like why I charge for my services, one, I've been doing this a long time and I'm providing a specific instruction. It's more expensive than like a gym membership because it's more than personal training. It's so much more. Like, I can't even begin to explain the expertise level that goes into being a legitimate martial arts coach. I'm not talking about some guy who runs a taekwondo school. Most of those guys aren't, and even them, like, they're providing a service, right? But there's also, you're using the school's equipment, the school's facility. You're using a lot of time out of your instructor, and there's a lot that goes into creating that environment for you, from cleaning to marketing to insurance. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. As a coach, most of my time is not spent on the mat when it comes to my program. Most of my time in my program is spent doing other things. So if you don't think you need to pay for martial arts, you probably don't really want to learn martial arts. If you really want to learn a real martial art and get good at it, yeah, you're going to have to pay money for it. Is it too late for me to start martial arts training? No. So some people go, well, if I want to get in the UFC. If you want to get in the UFC, it might be. You know, it's hard to get in the UFC if you don't start early enough. It's like any other professional sport. You don't start playing basketball for the first time at 35 and hope to get in the NBA. You know what I mean? But to get into martial arts and get good at martial arts, no. I had somebody who came in here yesterday who was in her 50s, and she started off really great. She's super excited. She's going to do really well. My dad's 76, and he still trains. You train at different things at different ages. You improve at different rates. It's easier to start as a kid. I don't think you should start early, though. I don't think you should start below the age of 10. I have a separate video coming out on this. Starting below the age of 10 is a big waste of money. But yeah, you can start at any point. How long does it take to become an expert in the martial arts? You know, to become a black belt, it doesn't make you an expert. To become a black belt in some martial arts makes you more of an expert. Expertise is a really thrown around term because it's not like, we think of it as a very like before and after moment. You get a doctorate and you are now a doctor. You're an expert, right? We expect you are now the expert because you have a doctorate. That is not how martial arts works. It is a continuous process of growth. And there are some things I'm an expert in. There's some things I'm not. My stand-up, I would consider myself an expert in stand-up because I know a lot about stand-up. But I still have a lot to learn. I'm constantly learning more about it. And there's a lot of things that I constantly find out I don't know much about. I'm pretty good at jiu-jitsu. I don't think I'm an expert at it. But expert is also relative. You know what I mean? Like, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 10 years. My guys who come in day one, yeah, that makes me an expert. They don't know shit, right? Or even guys who've been doing it like a year. By comparison, that makes me an expert because I know a lot more about it. But, you know, it's a very subjective term, and we like to think about it as either on or off, and it's not. It's a scale, right? Like, and it's a scale for other things. There's things I am a black belt in. There's things I'm purple belt in. There's things I'm a white belt in. There's things I am truly a master of. It's subjective. I would say to be good enough to hold your own in a fight, if you're doing a good martial art that is designed for it, about 2 years to become proficient, to be able to beat most people, 80 to 90% of people in a fight. to be able to beat all but a small select group of really high-end fighters, it takes, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe more, maybe never. You have to be physically fit to be a martial artist. Sometimes it helps. If you're talking about martial arts for self-defense, it sure helps. Conditioning matters. But there are also styles that there's guys who are big guys who maybe don't have the cardio, that they're heavy guys, but they know how to use their weight. They know how to slow down the pace. But yeah, conditioning, sure, it definitely helps. I don't think there's any martial art that's like, no, don't condition here. We want you out of shape and breathing hard. To start, you don't need to be in shape. You'll get in shape. And the best way to get in shape is by doing the style that you want to learn, because it depends. Number 10, does power, size, strength matter in a fight? Yeah. Sure helps. People who say that strength doesn't matter and size doesn't matter in martial art, it matters. I don't care what martial art. Jiu-jitsu, people are like, well, jiu-jitsu, if you're strong and fast, it matters. Like when I roll with guys who are really strong, it's harder to do techniques on them. They get away with a lot of bullshit. Number 11, we kind of already answered this, is black belt martial arts expert. Often no. Probably the closest would be something like jiu-jitsu, where it takes so long. If you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I would say you're probably an expert, right? You know a lot about jiu-jitsu. Most people, to get there, it takes a long time. Taekwondo, no. Taekwondo, you're barely an intermediate student at black belt, but that has to do with different reasons. As I understand it, in Korea, maybe not today, but it used to be you couldn't really compete at highest levels. You really couldn't do any meaningful competition unless you were a black belt. So people got pushed to promote quicker. So it means like it takes like 2 years to get a black belt in Taekwondo, maybe 3, if the school's a little bit slower. But even then, 2 to 3 years to get a black belt, and it's designed so that you get to an intermediate level so you can compete. It's basically like basics, but you're not an expert. Every style's a little bit different. Black belt means different thing to different people in different arts at different ages. So yeah, I guess that answers the question. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have your own questions, make sure you submit it on my website. I'll put the link below. Thanks for watching.